Today, it's been an absolute honor and privilege to have the MD and CEO of NPCI Beam.
So UPI sort of abstracted the account layer. I don't need your account number. I will give you a virtual private address. I think that's where it started. You are taking money from unorganized sector. You have a way to come into the organized sector. And this is what it is. There's scale and then there's India scale, right? India is so unique that you on one hand have to keep working towards AI and Internet of Things. And on the other hand, you have to solve for feature phones. So, and innovation is required in both. All the underlying, numbers and innovations and all that, there are people who are able to stand on their feet because it's a competition between convenience and caution. And then you let off your guard. So the next 200 million largely is a set of people who are a very close-knit community. Very beautiful thing, the technology doesn't discriminate, right? There are multiple times in the last 25 years where I felt, should I just quit next year? Should I just quit this year?
Increasing rise in digital frauds. You see aged people, so many of them, right? What should we be doing better there? And where does AI fit? Hi, welcome to the We Women Project. Today, it's been an absolute honor and privilege to have the MD and CEO of NPCI Beam, Lalita Nataraj, with us today. Thank you so much, Lalita.
Thank you, Vilas.
Thank you for taking the time out and doing this for the We Women Project. I think what's happening around NPCI is very, very exciting and awe-inspiring. I think the world is looking at us with different lenses after the UPI and all of that has come about. So very, very excited for this conversation. Thank you so much for being here.
Most welcome, Vilasni. It's a pleasure for me also. And I guess whatever little I know and I understand, I'm happy to share it. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. At the start of it, I want to talk about how this entire revolution has moved the wallet away entirely in India, right? It started with just a switch as a payment solution. Can you just, briefly talk to us about the NPCI
I guess
journey?
many years ago, NPCI was formed and I had closely had the opportunity to watch it as a banker, rather than as a, my journey in NPCI Beam is just about a year and a half old. But I've been watching NPCI as a banker and the way they have grown, right from setting up, like you said, a simple, clearinghouse kind of a back settlement function. I think the first inflection point was, IMPS, where the immediate payment settlement rails happened. And then was UPI. So UPI sort of abstracted the account layer from IMPS and said, you know what, I don't need your account number. I will give you a virtual private address. I think that's where it started. And moving away from IMPS, which probably handled real time but high value transactions, to a UPI, which handles high velocity, high volume transactions. Scaling up this particular DPI to a level which is like, really, really awesome has been a great contribution by NPCI. And this is a DPI which everybody is looking up to now. And the good thing is there are multiple other DPIs which have come in, which has drawn inspiration from that. And I'm sure all of them will scale up over time. But it's been a significant journey, I'm sure. And it's not just the NPCI, it's the regulator, the policy makers,
the entire ecosystem.
The adoption, the inflection points, which came around demonetization, COVID, all of them in disguise sort of, give the sufficient tailwinds for it to really be where it is what I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, you've listed out some of the innovations, etc., right? So now you are in the thinking room. So what's next in the payment space?
See, there's scale and then there's India scale, right?
Okay.
And then there is, India is so unique that you on one hand have to keep working towards AI and Internet of Things. And on the other hand, you have to solve for feature phones, right? So, and innovation is required in both, right? So I think a lot of usage, so NPCI per se is a deep tech company and a lot of people who have taken this DPI to the consumers are also, tech.
Can we break down DPI?
So I would say that anything which is interoperable, which is for public good, is
like
a digital public
source
infrastructure. Yeah. So I would say UPI is one. We have the account aggregator, which is the next one. We have the open network for digital commerce, which is a protocol where, you're able to list your item.
Yeah.
Let's say you're a Kirana store, you're able to list all your items on the ONDC layer. And anybody can go and purchase this from any app which gives you a form factor, right? Then we have the energy interfaces which are coming, which probably are actually ahead of time thinking, but will be much needed over the next few years. So these are all the various digital public goods that the country is working on. I might have missed a few, but there are
plenty,
many, right?
Yeah.
So innovation per se is for us both sides of the spectrum. So how do you solve for the feature phone market? How do you solve for voice-based payments, which is vernacular? And then how do you make sure that tomorrow the payments can be formless? The app will cease to exist very soon, right? So there'll be a set of people who will just talk to the car and want to make a payment, who will just talk to their smartphones and want to make a payment. That's one. And all this will have to be guarded by the trust, right? Because as innovations come in, you'll have, creative, frauds coming in. So we'll have to make sure that everything is guarded. There are POCs, there are references, there are experiments. So the spectrum is very, very wide. And, the entire ecosystem is doing their best to make sure that they are a part of this innovation and they contribute to the next steps to make sure that it's a very inclusive scale. That's very.
One thing that came to my attention, in the recent FinTech festival, the Prime Minister said that 50% of digital transactions in the world is carried out in India.
Yeah.
That's humongous.
It's a great scale. Yeah, I think UPI touches about 500 million customers and about 60 million merchants, and it is growing. I think the beauty is the fact that you're able to do a small ticket size. I think 2 years ago, I didn't see temples having QRs.
Yeah.
Now I'm seeing temples having QRs. Yeah. I see people who are wanting to take tips in the restaurant showing their personal QRs.
Yeah,
so, right?
Yeah. Your salons have, so everything is QR.
Yeah. And then there was, I think the best part is that we also, as consumers, are also learning. A few years ago, I remember that a taxi person will wait for the success screen to come, and then he will say, "Aap ja sakte ho." Now he says, "Aa jayega."
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So, people are getting used to it. People are getting accustomed to it. They feel that if this is not there, probably my business will go for a... But I think the unsaid stories are also there. For example, loads of women entrepreneurs have been able to start business because of this.
Is it? Okay. Can you tell me more?
Because you have a way to collect money. You have a way to digitally send your goods. Right? If this was not there, imagine how will they go and, they'll not be able to collect cash, right?
Yes.
So you're able to, send your... You could be doing a home business. You're able to send your saris from Odisha to a Pondicherry and, the acknowledgement and collecting the money. So you'll have so many Facebook entrepreneurs. I have a very nice story which I heard from somebody a few months ago. She said, I'm a single woman and my landlord used to come very late to collect money from me. Thanks to UPI, this doesn't happen. Right? So there are lots of forcing functions for people to adopt. And I think each one of us find our trust and our forcing function. So there's a lot of liberation that this is given. There is a lot of self, confidence. There is a lot of ability for somebody to stand on their own.
Absolutely.
I think that's the beauty of all the underlying, numbers and innovations and all that. There are people who are able to stand on their feet.
Beautiful. I never thought of it from this perspective, but yeah.
Yeah. So when we speak to people, we say, what helped you? How did you adopt? She said, this was my turning point. This was my forcing function to adopt, saying, "Ki aapko aana nahi hai, I will pay you." So then I downloaded the app, I did what I did, and I said, I will do this. So it's their own compulsion and functions. Yeah. So I think the numbers are truly superb, but I think the stories behind the numbers are very, very...
And in a country like India, which is so multidimensional, so layered, there must be so much of this at the ground level, right?
Which we and then credit. Now you're seeing that MSMEs, because of the fact that you get money digitally, banks are able to underwrite digitally, right? And it looks like all this it looks like they've been stitched together. I'm sure there have been lots of visionaries behind putting up these DPIs, but you imagine there's a digital payment, and then you're saying there's a digital ID, and then you're saying there is account aggregator, then there is collections. So everything is sort of tied up together, which is, I think, the best point to have. And I think we are all gifted to be in India at this time when there's so much exploding.
Beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. You feel it every single day.
Yeah.
Especially when you have an NRI friend visiting, I think,
correct.
You definitely feel this. So coming to NBSL, I think, the Beam function that you had has become a subsidiary. It's been moved out of the NPCI as a whole and created as a fully owned subsidiary.
Yes.
So tell us the genesis, what was the need? What was the ideation?
So I think everybody who knew the 2016 UPI launch will remember the Beam app. It was the first app which was launched by the Honorable Prime Minister. But it remained a reference app for experimentation purposes. And the objective was to allow innovation at scale for private players to come in with guarded rails of trust and innovation, right? But I think over the last few years, there has been a need to revive this because it's important for the country to have a national career. Somebody which is a sovereign app saying that, we can use this still as an experiment app, but for larger things and not just for UPI and all that. And there was a need to put focus and develop this. And that's why the wholly owned subsidiary was formed. The idea is more of collaboration and not competition. I think everything runs on UPI rails. So the trust and the interoperability and the resiliency is anyways achieved. But we wanted to ensure that we have one more form factor, which is probably the country's own form factor, which is homegrown. And this form factor will continue innovating on both sides of the spectrum. And they will work very, very closely with the banks and the ecosystem to liberate them, to make sure that we are able to take them along in the journey that we are doing. So that's the objective of forming this as a separate subsidiary.
Understand. Two questions here. One is, what is a form factor? Two is, why did it take NPCI 10 years? Like if 2016, the Beam app came about, then why 2024 or 23 is when
actually 24.
App 24 is when it became like a core. And there was so much mushrooming activity all around them in that period. What can you attribute it to?
So I think when I'll answer the first question, when I say the form factor, right now it's an app. Tomorrow it could be just a voice based, just a mic, just
so something that enables that last mile
payment.
transaction.
So that's what I mean. So right now, the form factor, we have a single form factor, which is a Beam app.
Yeah.
Why did it take us so much time? I think everything has
a time and place.
but there was an attempt made to revive Beam a few years ago. It was a strategic business unit within NPCI, but I think there was a feeling that unless it is given, because this is a B2C product, right? You'll have to give it a separate identity. You will have to do a lot of brand communication, campaigns, awareness, etc. And it's often possible that in the overall umbrella, this gets subdued if it's a strategic business unit. So I think there was a need to hive it off, and I guess it happened over multiple discussions and deliberations, and that's why it took a little bit of time.
And there is multiple innovations and multiple subsidiaries that have got created, right, in this period?
Yes, there are 4 subsidiaries now.
And can we just list them out also?
Yeah, so there is NIPL, NPCI International, which is the first subsidiary which was created, and that is serving international countries, taking UPI abroad, to ensure that there is acceptance infra created, and if we go abroad, we are able to use UPI in the corridors where the bilaterals have been signed up. There is NBBL, which is Bharat Connect, where they basically connect the consumer and the biller. And they have also started expanding into categories like invoice discounting, etc. Invoice payment rather than discounting. So that's the other arm. The third one is us. And there is also an NPCI Tech, NTSL, which has got created very, very recently. And that's going to work on things like asset tokenization, the central bank digital currency, etc. Because that's again an emerging area and it requires focus and people to work on it dedicatedly. So these are the 4 subsidiaries at this point in time.
Okay. Interesting. I think each of it has its own has
reason and there's a lot of thinking that
more
goes
than that,
behind.
the scope that you know,
Yeah.
the kind of value addition that they can
True,
deliver
true.
into this. So Lalita, now coming into your
Yeah.
life and where did you grow up? I know it, but
So
how
I was born and brought up in Chennai. Spent almost like 25 years of my life in Chennai. Then a little bit in Bangalore, and then Hyderabad and Bombay. So I've been mostly in South, except for this recent stint where I'm in Bombay.
So what are your memories from Chennai? I
So
have
Chennai
to tell
is
the
all
audience that Lalita is from my alma mater. So
Chennai is all about, we learned a lot. I think we were pretty much on our own as schoolgoers and college goers. We had our own set of trusted friends. The good part is all of us are in touch even now.
Oh, nice.
I think Chennai is all about learning, independence, freedom, fun, understanding each other. There's a lot of warmth that obviously your hometown carries, and I think a large part of what we have learned, the struggles and everything that we learned is all Chennai. Yeah.
So when you were starting off, who were some of your mentors? What did you think, of as your career in those early days?
See, I always wanted to graduate out of a good management school, but we did not have the resources at that point in time. So I said, okay, let me do something which is probably not full time. So which is how I ended up enrolling myself for a CWA program. While for the first few years, I did things which are related to my qualification. Later, I realized that I'm not going to challenge saying that, what is this related? I started picking up things which I thought will matter and which will help me grow. I think I've been lucky to have people who have been my seniors in each of these organizations who did not discriminate, who did not feel that, you don't have this background, so you can't do this job. And of course, you're a woman, you can't do this job. So we've been very lucky, I feel, to not come across such people. And that's been a very, very positive thing by itself. And of course, the support from family and everything. So the mentorship, I would say, is in the form of people whom I've worked with, my seniors who felt that you could do this job because you have the potential to do it, may not be the qualification to do it. And I think that's been a great memory for me all through wherever I have been working. And I guess that's very important. We also have to do that to our team members.
People, and we have to, BFSI somehow has that ability.
Yeah. They experiment with you.
They experiment with you.
As long as you are reciprocating.
Yes.
So that's a very good thing.
That's actually. If you had to list down some aha moments, like from this 25, 30-year career, what would have been like, what felt like very significant milestones, turning points?
So rather than giving you an outcome or an achievement as an aha moment, I'll give you one or two, I would say, perspectives which I received. So there was a time when, I was moved from a pure business function into business analytics. I had no idea what data warehouse and all that was. So I was very perturbed. I said, what am I doing? Why am I doing all this? And my boss that time, he said, I put my toughest people in the most difficult jobs. That was the one line. Yeah. There was no second line to it. There was no explanation. So then I went back and I said, so then there is something that,
they see
which I've probably not been able to understand. So I think that was a moment saying that, if somebody's trying to do something, maybe it's not that they're doing it because they mean bad. There is always something good behind it. So it's better to talk and find out what it is. And I think that was I think maybe because of upbringing or whatever, I don't know. When somebody shows trust, I reciprocate 2x. So every time I have seen trust as a factor coming in and somebody trusting me and telling me, you can do this, I find myself reciprocating multiple fold. So I started doing that with my my peer group and my teams now. But I guess that was from an achievement perspective. I think the fact that I could branch out from a pure play finance business function to something, a mixture of a little bit of data, a little bit of technology, and then which is
bringing things
application
together.
oriented,
Yes.
not really, because I did a little bit of business of, I did underwriting for credit, etc. So I knew how to apply technology and data into business. So I think that, and it was not a thought through process at all. I just picked up what came my way with a leap of faith, saying that, what, everything can make sense at some stage if we do it well. So I think these were I would say, a few moments of changes of jobs, people trusting me. These are the things that I would call as my aha moments, which I will not forget, and they live with me forever.
Yeah, we hold them with gratitude. What were some of the challenging moments? I mean, having a 25-year career and growing, and all of it brings with it the balancing that we have to do. It's like a tightrope walking.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's very easy as well. Like, how has it been?
No, so I think the fact that we are doing what we're doing and we've been able to continue working is, I think, a great achievement. It's not, that's what I keep telling women around. It's not about whether you're occupying a leadership position. You have brave to not, step down from your job, not to, say that, I'll call it. I think that's been a very, very important point for me. And I've actually taken it one step at a time. There are multiple times in the last 25 years where I felt, should I just quit next year? Should I just quit this year? But I just said, acha, one more year. One more year. It's not that I thought that I will continue working for 25 years, because that's a very overwhelming situation, right? There's a lot happening around. I still carry the guilt of not being at home when my son used to come from school. But I guess in hindsight, the fact that we are able to connect them to people in our network, the fact that they find that we are resourceful is a very, very happy thing at this point in time, rather than saying, what, I could have taken care of them at that time. So they forget that. What they remember is what you are now, and they've grown up as responsible people. They know that we have brought them up like that. So I think it's been, I wouldn't say it's been a very, very easy and happy thing, but it's not been tough either, because I had a supportive, very, very supportive family, a supportive husband and in-laws, and nobody said, why do you want to work? It's just that they said, oh, you've studied so much, you must work. So it's a good thing that way. But because I think it happens with all women, we feel that
we carry a lot of burden on
we
ourselves.
are the only one who carry the burden on us. And we feel we want to do everything perfect. It is that self, this thing which causes you a lot of, I would say pressure. And I don't think we can come out of it. That is how we are built. So I think that's
beautiful. I think I like the 1 year at a time.
And
those micro goals and just staying the course. Lovely. So before I get back into the payments side, I think you have a long stint in digital banking in the bank and digital banking, and I think you must have seen that space evolve over the last decade and a half. So what are your, how do you see it, or how have you seen it evolve?
So I used to tell my team that I was working when ATMs were not interoperable. Right? You could go to only your bank ATM to withdraw money, right? You remember? Those were the days when we started our jobs. But I think it's come a long way. I was fortunate to be a part of ICICI Bank when ICICI Bank started internet banking. Right? Internet banking that time was a big deal, right? So I think what has happened and what is continuing to happen is, one, of course, some of the consumer-facing assets of the banks have been modernized, which is why you find a very sleek and very good go-to interfaces with almost all the banks today. Right? They've taken time, but I guess the trust that you have in the banking interface will never go away. Right? So they've done a great job there. I think what's happening over the last few years is they are digitizing inside out, which is also important, right? Because they've got multiple systems, and these are legacy systems. You can't just migrate and replace. It takes time. So I guess a combination of these two, which is the consumer facing applications getting modernized, and the digitizing inside out, which the banks are doing, is helping you get very, very superior service for anything that you want. There is still a long way to go. I am sure that we would have had instances where you would have had some service issues because of which you've had to walk to the branch, which I think the banks are truly trying their best to sort it out. But branches have now become almost like, I would say, a branding point.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But you still feel that, acha, ye bank mere ghar ke baaju mein hai, so I will open an account. So there's a comfort. So that comfort and trust ke liye the branches are definitely required. There are one-off instances, but I think most of the facilities that are there with sufficient guardrails have been brought in the hands of the consumer. So that's how the digital has changed over time. I think they first did services, which is, when I say services, it's about money transfers. Now you can open an account, you can close an account, you can take a loan, you can repay your loan, you can do top-ups, you can take your account statement. So they're expanding from, I would say money transfers to sales to now to service. So I think it's been a beautiful journey. Long way to go, but this has become threshold. So all the banks are trying their best to make sure that this is very, very basic.
And basic is
in place.
When you say long way to go, what do you attribute there?
Because see, everything is changing, right? They also have to adopt to AI. They also have to adopt to the changing technologies, the wearables, right? So you're saying now, I don't want to walk into the branch. There are your kids who will say, I don't want to use the app only. So everybody as a, see, that way, if you see the fintechs or the companies who have started for a purpose, let's say a payment fintech or let's say a lending fintech, do not have a legacy of systems.
Yeah.
The banks have a legacy of the systems. Yeah. That's why when I say long way to go, they have to modernize those systems.
They have to let go. So it's a whole thing. You'll have to put out a strategy.
It's a very, very thought through strategy because you cannot inconvenience anybody. Yeah. Neither your system, nor the regulator, nor the consumers. Yeah. And that's very important.
Absolutely. Here I have two questions. One is, around AI. So what do you see as AI use cases? Where do you see AI build up in the digital? At least we'll stick to the payments before we get on to lending. And two is the increasing rise in frauds, digital frauds. You see aged people, so many of them, right?
Yeah.
So what should we be doing better there? And, where does AI fit into this whole scheme of things?
So I think as far as running AI experiments and technologies are concerned, there is a lot of governance that has been put on by the regulator to make sure that we do responsible AI. Right? So all of us, including banks, are all governed by it. It is not just AI. Any new innovation is going to have, like we discussed, degree of risk, which to a large extent is ironed out during the sandbox or the testing phase. The ironing out could be that you put a two-factor authentication, you put a limit, you say that this is allowed for only a particular category of customers and above, right? All that gets done. So a product which gets to the market goes through all these, checks and balances, like the ISI certification that we talk about. Right? So it goes through all this before it lands. Despite that, as and when, it's a catch-up game, it's a cat and mouse game between. There's a lot of awareness which is being done. The banks too, you'll find HDFC is spending a lot of time on this vigilante property that they're doing. You find ICICI doing, NPCI does it with a few renowned people. RBI does it with Mr. Bachchan. So there's a lot of awareness creation that's happening.
So it's primarily literacy that's going to change this?
See, it's like this. It's a competition between convenience and caution. Right? You somehow feel that you just want to get away with somebody asking you for money while you're busy on a call.
Yeah.
Right? Acha, I want to give you, okay, I'll give you. You send me the link. Now, you don't realize that you want to finish that business. You want to finish that job. Right? You don't realize that link is probably coming from an unknown person. So it's not just about literacy. It's about even you and me can fall prey to it, right? Imagine you're in a morning hustle. You are wanting to do something and then somebody keeps on paying, you have to give me this money. Link DJ, right? So you don't realize that it's for a different purpose. And like I said, it's just about convenience. I want to finish that topic and move on. and then you let off your guard, and that becomes a start point for it. So it's just about the fact that you're able to do this so conveniently that you forget to be a little cautious. I think that's the reason. But I guess it's a question of time. We will together make sure that this is taken care. This is where the next 200 million problem comes in, right? Because they are so closely knit. One person in a self-help group facing this problem will make the entire self-help group lose confidence.
Absolutely.
So this is important for us as a society, as the entire system to tackle, and we are and we will be at it. And AI can also be used here. So talking about AI, it's not just about innovation, it's about identifying patterns, it's about identifying what goes wrong where. So a lot of algorithms are being used for all this.
I think I made a mistake saying AI and fraud in the same breath. I didn't mean AI in terms of caution, but I meant AI purely from an innovation
point of view. But like we said, they're connected,
it's beautiful.
Innovation
and you brought
connected.
It out absolutely wonderfully. But AI as an innovation tool.
Yeah, I think, like I said, most of the stuff that we are trying to do, this agentic AI, where do you need to really have an app to check out of your e-commerce site? Do you need to? Why would you not talk to your dashboard of your car to do a FASTag recharge while you're on your way? Right?
Absolutely.
And do you really need that FASTag to be a separate sticker? Can't it be a part of your? So, like how you have a Aadhaar, which is your personal ID. Can I have a vehicle ID and everything linked to it? A fuel linked to a vehicle ID. So it's an Internet of Things plus an AI combination. So there are multiple things. And internally also, right? How can I code better? How can I check the quality of my code better? How can I answer in a very guarded way, not really using an open framework? How can I take care of customer queries? Very recently in GFF, NPCI launched a very beautiful product called UPI Help, which is a SLM based model where wherever you have gone and set up a standing instruction, which we call it mandate, you will be able to see it on that portal. Oh. Because sometimes, you set up an instruction on Netflix, Amazon, sometimes you set it up
That's a real problem today.
Google Pay, PhonePe. So this will help you. It's basically a small language model which runs out of a guarded set of data, and it comes and says, you know what, here's where you've set up.
Oh, beautiful.
It's just an informative thing. So there can be multiple ways in which we can deploy it, and it's at an inflection point, as you can see, and it's
multiple things. No, it's a very exciting
phase.
Yeah. So we have had so much innovation and breaking of barriers and everything in payments. What do you think about lending? Why is lending taking, am I allowed to say that it's taking a long time and it's still a very expensive proposition? You've been on the banking side, so I'm taking the liberty to ask.
I think digital lending has also come a long way. But like you said, it is important to underwrite so that you are able to recover the money. To a large extent, I think the banks have been able to reduce the cost to lend because of most of these digital properties that are available. So I think lending is available for people like us on tap, which probably earlier was available in multiple taps, is available quickly. But what's important, I think, is to take lending to, again, the next set level, of population, which is where I think, what's going to happen is that they do not need a loan of 1 lakh rupees. They'll probably need a loan of 10,000 rupees. And they need to probably pay it in daily installments and not even a monthly installment. So they will need curated products, which I think is getting unlocked in a way. Again, it's a very beautiful combination of having your digital ID. The account aggregator or the cash flows help you understand that you're really having inflows into the account. The fact that you're able to get 20 rupees every day, for sure. I know that you can pay 10 rupees, repay 10 rupees every day, right? Keeping aside 50% of your money for various reasons, right? So I think this assessment and the algorithms behind this assessment and the back testing of the good, bad, because these people will not have a CIBIL score. They don't have a credit score. That is taking a little bit longer, but the rails are established, so it's only a question of time. There is a lot of thrust on the MSME credit also, which the government has
MSME,
brought
there's a
in,
lot of
right? So, which is where the small ticket size. So, why will a bank say I will not lend less than 50,000 rupees? Because for them, the cost of lending will not get covered otherwise, right? And if this person does not repay on time, sending a collector to go or sending an agent from the bank to go and take the money in cash is actually not at all making sense, because the cost of collection is far higher than even the EMI that is going to get collected. So that's why the self-serving behavior of, I will repay using my payment instrument, right? Those have been established now over time. And as they go into the various segments of the society, this behavior of cash flow based lending, this behavior of, I would say, trust based lending, because I know I've seen you getting this inflow over time. That's important. And that's getting established in small pockets, and that's how it will really.
So that will grow.
That will grow, yeah.
Understand. So after all this, coming back to payments, coming back to payments and Beam. So Beam is considered a reference app, right, for UPI innovations and for scalable payments. So how do the two elements work?
So Beam was considered a reference app. Now we are as good as any other market app.
Okay.
Though we still have the responsibility of making sure that anything new that NPCI is putting out, we codify it in the app and we provide the test environments, and we also work with everybody else who's going live, because it's an interoperable system, right? We'll have to have multiple apps powering it. So we have a test environment where all of them come and test it. So in that sense, it will remain an app where a lot of experiments get conducted. But the real ones which are consumer relevant and the one that pass the test will go to the market. So we continue to carry that responsibility, but we are right now a proper marketing, market app, which focuses on building consumer brand, awareness, trust, recall, and various things, right? So we have a very, very huge captive base. Many people downloaded Beam. But they've not used it. So our job is to go and tell them that, we have a new UI, we have a simple UX, so please start using it. So this is one. Like we're solving for recall and getting back into your muscle memory of opening the app, we are also solving for feature phones. We are also solving for voice-based payment. We are also solving for a few, I would say, use cases where we think we are creating a market. For example, you would have seen the article very recently which spoke about how EPFO withdrawals are getting digitally enabled through Beam, right? So these are places which this market did not exist. Now the market is existing. Now which app will they go and withdraw from? They should preferably go to one of the apps which is there in their phone already. They will not download another app for probably withdrawing this, which is a once in a while occasion, right? It's not a daily occasion. So where do you take this where the consumers are already coming? So these are market, I would say we sort of help in making the market and growing the market along. The other thing that we're doing is also to work very, very closely with the banks. Because banks want to make sure that their app is used for their consumers making UPI payments.
Understand.
But because when you log into a banking app, you need to call 25 different APIs to show your profile. The login time, more often than not, is a notch higher than a simple payment app. Right? Because in a payment app, I just have to show one profile. Your payment profile. Here I have to show, because when you log in, you will say you have so much loan to repay. So everything will have to come together, right? So these are heavy back-end calls. So we are trying to work with the banks to see how this payment layer can be simplified. And very recently, about a month ago, Canara Bank went live with our plugin. So where we are saying that Canara Bank will market their app, but their app will be powered by Beam plugin. So we take away the technology burden of running a tech stack of UPI from Canara Bank. They use their form factor of Canara Bank app for their consumers. There will be a huge set of consumers who trust a banking app for making payments, because their feeling is banking app mein main karunga to I can complain, my money will come back easily, which is a fact, because they know where the money is going and coming, right? So, so the banks want to take a stab at this game again. So we are trying to work with these.
So Beam app means, from the Canara Bank app, he directly comes into your ecosystem.
When he links on, when he goes to Canara Bank app and click on payment, the Beam SDK gets invoked.
Understood. Okay.
So they become the form factor, we become their technology part.
And like this, you have 500 odd banks is the number?
We are tied up with 500 banks, but we are powering the app of very few banks. So Canara is one of them. We are talking actively to 2-3 more big banks, and we will be working with them. So our job, like I said, is not to just run and get market share. Our job is to make sure that we solve for some of these use cases, go to markets which probably, bigger apps may not go because they may not find a cross-sell potential in that consumer, right? So that's the other thing. Dilip used to tell us, Beam is not competition, Beam is collaboration. So that's something that's very, very entrenched in our mind, and that's what we will continue to work towards.
Interesting. So, talking about the other players in the market, I just wanted to kind of pick your brains on the competitive landscape. So a lot of them utilized or capitalized this functionality of UPI, went about acquiring a lot of customers, users, etc. And I think they've also been conduits for change. They've driven the active adoption that has happened. So how do you see that commentary? How do you see the competitive landscape, what they have done for us?
So I think thanks to them, as if I were to look at NBSL's job to do, we don't need to educate anybody about UPI. Imagine, those days, 2016, 17, PhonePe and Google Pay had to also educate the user about UPI, also sell their app. It was multiple things they had to do. So now for me, UPI is a given. I have to only sell my app, right? So the job is very easy for me, if you ask me. They've created the network effect. So I just have to tell them that, this app is like any other payment app. I don't need to tell them what is a payment app. So I think to a large extent, they have made lives simpler for people who are coming later, which is even people like me. There are many small apps which are coming. I think the selling point of this particular railroad or this particular utility is a given. You just have to tell them that this is, the very simple way to tell them, oh, this is like Google Pay, this is like PhonePe. So that's all, right? So then the customers are able to draw parallels, which is a very beautiful thing, I think. And that's where the collaboration thing comes in, right? So they've done a great service at that point in time. I don't know whether in 2016 when UPI started, they all knew that this will grow so much. There's a lot of investment which has gone behind it, a lot of hard work which has gone behind it. I think PhonePe just completed 10 years. So a lot of hard work and a lot of investment. And I think many of us, like how we are saying that we are piggybacking on the NPCI's UPI railroads that have been built, we are also banking on the already created network and effect and trust that has been created by these first movers. And the other apps are also trying to take the benefit out of it at this point.
Absolutely. And they have actually, what they've done quite beautifully is integrated a lot of bells and whistles around this. Like in the banking system, we used to acquire him as a consumer, durable customer and then take him through the cross-sell, upsell. I think they bring him in as a UPI user and give him access to the entire value chain.
True.
So do you see Beam playing that game?
So we will do a little bit of it, may not be all out. But as an app, because we are a for-profit organization, what is important to us is how often does the consumer come on your app, right? So if I'm able to get him or her often, then it's probably a good win for us. So which means that should I expose daily utilities like, mobile recharges? Should I expose utilities like buying a gift card? Should I expose utilities like booking a bus ticket? So these are all things that we are working on. Because we are working with the banks, we will start putting banking products on top of Beam, either by redirecting the consumer traffic to the banks or by, taking the API and doing a cross-sell. But we will do things which are very relevant to us. We may not venture into things which are not contextual at this point. For example, credit card is very contextual and relevant to us because you can link with UPI and Pay. So some of these cross-sell products we will definitely do, and we will do it in collaboration with the banks.
Which ones do you have
I
in
think
mind?
the immediate ones that we have in mind are actually credit cards.
Hmm.
There might be certain products which are fixed deposits or deposit products which the banks are working with us on. So these are two products which recurring deposits, fixed deposits, and credit cards are products which have been in mind, which are in the immediate, I would say, next 6-7 months horizon for us.
You talk about the next 200 million.
Yeah.
You've mentioned it 2-3 times. So where is the next 200 million, or how do you see this landscape?
So the next 200 million largely is a set of people who are a very close-knit community, like I told you, the SHGs, the cooperative societies, the people who are probably in not near the towns. They feel that they could be a trust factor. They could be that one person whose payment has failed or has had a fraud. Could be one reason for it. Two could be network, really, because they genuinely have network problems as you go. Even in the cities, you find pockets where there are network problems. And three people, there is still about 20-30% of this 200 millions who are not on smartphones, they're in feature phones. So Beam provides a USSD based payment.
What is that?
So you'll be able to, do a messaging based payment. Right?
Okay.
But do we popularize it very, very much? We don't, because it requires a lot of awareness creation and all that. So we have to solve for these people. Either it can be a trust, it can be facilitation because of the network related issues, or it can be a feature phone related solve. There are people amongst us also, when we did the survey, who said that they use credit more than debit because credit cards help you build credit score. So now, just drawing a parallel, these people need not use debit because they have a digital instrument credit card. So what is important to unlock value for the next 200 million is actually the credit that you were talking about, right? If you tell them that you show digital traces in your bank account because of inflows and outflows, your ability to borrow will be better, right? Then they will have a forcing function. Right, so it's all connected together, right? So why will they do? They have a banking correspondent coming and collecting money from them. Unless they have a incident where they feel there is a trust issue with the banking correspondent, they need not shift. Their life is fine. Shift. So what is the next forcing function? You are taking money from unorganized sector. You have a way to come into the organized sector, and this is what it is. Which again connects back to the fact that banks have to do short ticket lending. They have to look at cash flows to do the lending. So all this is all opening up in small phases. So I think there will be a forcing function for them. But there should also be an infra facilitation in the form of solving for their actual problems. There are also very, very minute problems, like they have one phone in the family. How will they be self-sufficient? They cannot be self-sufficient, right? So now, again, going into a formless payment is not the answer to it. Their Aadhaar is linked to one phone. You can't do device banding, right? So we will have, there's a policy solve. And there is also a technology solve. I think we will probably address the technology solve sooner. The policy solve is a little tricky to address because it will come with a lot of risks which one has to weigh. So I think the forcing function.
Do you have to bucket it? What will be a policy solve? I kind of get it. It must be the Aadhaar.
Exactly. Linked to the same phone, oriented. Right? You have one phone. How can the husband in the family has got a phone. The wife has got an account linked to the same phone. You can't link all the accounts of different individuals in that phone, right? So how will you bind and bring, you can't have 4 UPI apps with 4 profiles. Opening it up is not a solve because you don't know what the downsides of opening up those things will be. So that's a policy solve, if I were to say. The structural solve or the technology solve is the network, the phones. I would even say that lending is a tech solve in a way. How do you tell them and educate them and get this going? So these are the various things. So once that forcing function of small ticket size lending, the MSME, the acceptance infra is there, I think this will also get solved.
Where is the UPI circle? Does the UPI circle solve for some of this?
UPI circle solve for some of this, but it is going to take time for it to go to the next 200 million. Actually, it will solve for a lot of things where, let's say, for example, you are having a child who is probably 12, 13, 14 years old. You don't want him or her to use their own bank account because you feel that, one, it's the bank may or may not provide UPI. Second is you feel that, it's not required for you to aggregate from that account. I'll give you your pocket money. Instead of that pocket money, you give something called a UPI circle where you add them on to your account, allow them to only pay. They cannot receive money, right? The same thing you can do for your parents because you feel that, invariably our parents will keep reasonable amount of money in their bank account because that's their mental security. But putting that bank account into a linking process might cause them a little bit of anxiety. So you tell them that I will give you a 10,000 rupee circle limit. You go and spend wherever you want to spend. The debit will come to my account. It's like you're adding them on to your UPI.
It's like an add-on.
Add-on is a wrong word because you don't really KYC them. You're just giving them some kind of a pocket money. So you're allowing them to pay through your account with authorization. It can even hold true for, let's say, you want to fill your car with fuel and you don't want to give cash to your driver because you don't have cash that day, not that you don't trust him. You can just add him for UPI circle for one day.
For one transaction and withdraw it the next day.
Same way, he has to go and collect your vehicle from, let's say, the petrol station. So you have to take it. But the setup of UPI circle and deliberately has one or two steps of friction where when you do the process, you will realize that you need to actually know that person because you will make that person's QR, you will scan it. So we want to make sure that there is proximity and there is a trust which is built in when you actually set up that account. So at the cost of causing friction, we've made sure that, it is not misused by anybody. So there's a limit. You can't receive money. You can only send money. The original payer gets a notification every time.
I was just going to ask you that.
So
there's going to be a notification.
You can
there's
also,
going to be an authentication by the...
That's your choice. You can decide that I will authenticate every payment of yours for the first 10 days. And after that, I will allow you to be on your own. So there are multiple ways. So this product has been thought through a lot, and it is being taken to the market step by step. We have a good user base. Most of BFSI uses it actually because they understand the product well. It's not yet gone to non-BFSI, and we are also popularizing it in a very limited and garden manner.
I see quite a bit of sound bites around that.
Yeah.
Coming back to the distribution part of it, I saw the GDP to UPI ratio or UPI to GDP ratio as one of the key metrics that is being governed, and a lot of states not cutting up to the more developed states, etc. So does that tie in with the 200 million?
In a way, yes, but I don't think it's concentrated on any particular state. It's about it's a general. So when we did the survey, we did in about 12 cities, right? So the good part is in most of the states, the acceptance infra is solved. There is no merchant who says, I will not accept a UPI payment. I think that we've overcome thanks to a lot of policy interventions that have taken place. I think it's just about awareness, and I don't see it's related to,
But I was quite surprised that quite a few of who I would have thought urban states. Of course, the Northeast was there and some of, the eastern states were there, but there were also other states like Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, etc. Falling back on this, like their stats were not as good as a Gujarat or a Tamil Nadu, etc. on the UPI adoption, on the payments adoption digitally.
No, so I think again, it's a question of how this entire thing is tied together, right? There are a lot of states which did direct benefit transfers. Using UPI, and they were early adopters. So even now there are many states who are trying to do direct benefit transfers through programmable currency. So if you are giving money digitally, then you pay digitally. So it's a cycle. So I don't remember this in great detail to correlate, but I guess that there will be a correlation between a lot of programs and schemes and the adoption and the facilitation by the acceptance infra and various other things. That would be the...
Because the jam is being talked about continuously, no?
Yes,
So a
yes.
lot of the dissemination
See, actually,
has to happen.
It's a very beautiful thing. The technology doesn't discriminate, right?
Yeah.
You-
Yeah.
Whether it's the top 200 billion, next 200 million, state, etc. So there would have been something around it which probably caused that inflection point in one place and not the other.
Absolutely. Staying with the competition angle, like, if a national player like the Beam or whatever is struggling to solve for this next set of customers, the acquisition process or the incremental UPI users for any of these platforms is not going to be an easy journey. Do they have solutions? The larger players like Google Pay or a Phone Pay?
No, so I think it has to be solved in the combination of the banks plus the business correspondents plus some of us, right? So firstly, they have to have an operating account. They have to be told to fund the account regularly. Even yesterday, very surprisingly, I came across somebody who said, "Mere paas account nahi hai." So I think it's important because it's the KYC customer whom you expose all these services to, right? So the KYC is done by the bank. So it's about the reach, it's about the opening of the account. Then these services really follow on. So one of the things that we are doing when we work with the banks is also that we are trying to see how we can use the banks to sort of collaborate and extend this, because for them, a banker or a business correspondent is the most trusted individual because they meet them every day. So it's about establishing the trust and then KYCing them, opening individual accounts for 4 members of the family, which is not there today.
Correct,
so I think the payments reach is probably the next in the line. The first one is
the Jandan or the banks to reach them is the first.
Yeah.
Understood. So in a nutshell, if you have to, kind of summarize what Beam means or how Beam is differentiated, do you have anything to say, Lalita?
No, so like I said, we are making sure that we are truly for national public good. Our job is to show traction on the app, meaningful traction on the app, ensure that we become one of the trusted apps of the country, work with the banks to solve any technology related payment gaps that they have, just because of bandwidth issues, not because of capability issues. They just have so many products to sell and continuously nurture the ecosystem. So we have a responsibility to make sure that all these are taken care of.
If I have the stats right, you moved from 39 million transactions to 139 million in about 7-8 months. Yeah. And how did that happen? How was the market?
So, like I said, we had a captive base. We just had to remind them. So we've had customers who probably had one bad experience, or they felt that, these people are not, see, you observe, right? If somebody does not update their technology, they give up. These people don't change. So that's why you find many apps also changing their UI consistently, right? So many people give up saying that, very boring, right? So we had to tell them, we just have to tell them that, what, we are back. Just give us a chance. And for me to give you a chance, I have to break a repetitive behavior. So I have to give you an incentive. So we started rewarding repetitive behaviors also, which we feel is paying off in the long run, because when I give you a repetitive behavior reward, you come back for the second time that behavior, provided I don't goof up as an app, right? You come back. And second time, you don't expect a reward. Second time, you are happy with the trust. You are happy ki, last time, theek chala. I'll give you one more chance. That's what we want to, take care of. What we also observed when we studied our customer base is that we have a very, very high percentage of customers coming to us for IPOs, which means there is trust.
Security and trust,
yeah. So we had to solve for, and we had to tell them that, what works for large ticket will work for small ticket, surely. Which means we had to better our speed and resilience. So, see, if you're trusting me with a 50,000 rupee debit, there is no reason why you will not trust me with a 5 rupee. You're not trusting me with 5 rupees because you feel ki, yaar, ye 5 rupees mein 5 seconds lagta hai. Other apps takes 1 second. So I had to solve for resiliency and the speed, and of course a simpler interface. And we had to tell the customers, I'm giving you something for you to give me another chance. So I think a combination of this is working well, and that's where we are. We have a beautiful team which is focused on building for Bharat, and I guess that's what keeps us going.
How does profitability work in all of this?
See, all the payment apps, including us, including everybody, it's the first phase is going to be a lot of investment, right? It will take time to get the benefits out, and UPI is a free of cost property today. So that's why you see people cross-selling products, right? So that's the revenue model finally. So over time, over the next few years is when we will start gaining a break-even. So the first few years is going to be investment. And it's important for us also because, like I said, we are taking the banks along. We're doing a lot of things for the society. So the break-even is going to take a few years. And that is going to come once we start opening up the third-party products and the revenue-making products in the app. That's its position.
The other thing that I wanted to speak about the Beam infrastructure is how strong the security and data privacy angle is on all of this.
So the payment apps are not allowed to store the data, actually. So that's the first guardrail that has been put up. So anytime you do a check balance, right? The balance is not stored in the app. It after you put your PIN or authentication, it goes and fetches the balance from the bank's payment service layer and comes back. Similarly, even when you ask for transactions, right? There's something called a payment service layer in the bank. That is what fetches you the transaction. So the app is not allowed to store the data. It can give you another cross-sell opportunity because they've acquired you, but they will not be able to store the data. So that's the guardrail that has been built in. And overall, let's say, for example, if you are downloading a new UPI app for the first time, you will not be able to transact for more than 5,000 within the first 24 hours. You will not be able to send money to merchants who are not verified merchants beyond a particular value. There is a daily limit. So there are lots of guardrails which have been put up to ensure that you are entering into a safe space. And that's how, and this keeps getting reassessed. These limits keep getting increased as awareness goes up, as convenience goes up. As you know that it's secure, you keep increasing the limits. For certain categories, the limits have been increased. So those are continuous review of processes, continuous review of fraud management that keeps happening.
So, but what is the data game, Lalita? Because all the payment apps, right? If you pay a utility bill, they're able to track it. If you pay electricity, they're able to know. So they own this customer. The ownership of the customer becomes the central point of communication with most of the modern payment enablers, payment aggregators. When they cross-sell, they know the data. How does that ecosystem work?
See, because I've been with a bank, I will answer this from a banker's lens. Firstly, the customer owns his or own data. Nobody owns the customer's data, right? The bank is your custodian as far as KYC and everything is concerned. Everything has that underlying bank account, either a bank or in the lending case an NBFC, right? So they are the people who are trusting you. So all of us are channels, right? We are the channels of communication. But it is very important also because, for example, if you come and make a payment on Beam as a channel or Beam as an app and it fails, you will not remember that, you know what, my bank was down, so it failed. Absolutely. You will say, "Achha, Beam mein nahi chala."
Absolutely.
Right? So we carry a responsibility as a channel because we are taking the delivery of the goods and services to the consumer. The consumer sees us in that payment front, but the actual custodian of KYC and the consumer, I would say, underwriting, etc., is the bank. And we are the channels. So from a data point of view, let's say bills, for example, you said, because I go and link and I store the bill in the app. So when you fetch a bill, right, you actually keep it in the app. So I only know that you have a bill and a due date. You may desire to pay this bill. For example, if you've paid an electricity bill on Google Pay on the 1st of January, Beam will not know it. It will still keep reminding you because it doesn't know that you have paid. Next time you come and pay it on Beam, Google Pay will not know. Google Pay will still keep reminding you. So the data that way, the fact that you paid the bill, I just put a tick mark and the actual data goes and sits in the payment service provider layer or the network layer, right? So these are all form factors which exposes information in a consented fashion.
So are
And because you come to my app multiple times, I can nudge you with a cross-sell. So that's the data play, if you ask me. Right? I know that a person who probably transacts in my app and clicks on IPO when IPO is happening is a premium customer. So maybe that's the person. So it's a behavior thing that we do. It's not so much backed by actual financial data. It's about ability to understand, are you transacting 2 times a day, 3 times a day? Again, your pattern. If you transact in the morning and the lunchtime and the evening, you're probably a salaried employee. If not, probably you're a weekender. So where do you transact? How do you transact is what I know. What do you do? Where do you pay? And location is also consent based today. I don't need to know where you're paying from. It's a consent based. So most of it is consent based. So the underlying information, balance, everything is with the bank. It's about the behavior, which is the data pattern that we send.
So you were in a position to create data patterns.
Yes.
You are not owning the customer, or you're not. So this whole ownership game doesn't exist. That's a myth. But what you can do is intelligently use this data, create the patterns. Who is excited to consume it? There is an excitement in the market, right?
So
around this data.
Okay, so see that there you actually get the account aggregator into the picture, right? But as of now, if you see the apps that we're talking about, it's about linking and contextualizing a sale for you, right? The fact that you recharge a FASTag, you might have a car. You might want to renew your insurance. I don't know when, but you might want to renew. So that's something that's probably relevant to you. So that's something that I can try to cross-sell to you, right? And if you make an insurance purchase on me once, then I will know the next year you will, the next year's due date I might know roughly, right? You might come back or not, but I know. So that's when history start developing in terms of behaviors. Now, when you talk about how this data is relevant from a lending point of view is when account aggregator comes, right? So when I want to borrow or when I want to get personal finance advice, I authorize an app or the lender to take my data maybe one time or multiple times. That's when the account aggregator comes. So when let's say I am going and taking a loan from, let's assume Bajaj Finance, because it's an NBFC, I'm bringing that example. And on the NBFC, I am saying, I am authorizing you to take my account statement from ICICI Bank. So they digitally take the account statement, they underwrite. And they can also say, I want this account statement to be monitored for 8 months. So I will give consent for monitoring. Then they can increase my credit line. They can decrease my credit line. They can nudge me that, you are not keeping sufficient balance. So all these things will happen. So the excitement of using the data is this, where because it is available digitally, see, I have paid digitally, so it's available in my bank digitally. So the lender need not ask me again for physical proof of income. It's come in the bank and then I have flow. So the lender can calculate what is her saving potential per month by looking at 6 months of data. Because all my spends are there in the account, my money is there. So that's the data excitement.
Yeah, see, the transaction I completely get. This is like a regulated transactional. We use it as a surrogate. We use all of these data points. I understand. But the valuations come because, this entity has access to a lot of data from a data point.
See, like I said, more than data, it's about customer footfall. I give you an example. You will, in the olden banking days, right? You will have certain branches which are premium branches. Why? Because you know that that vicinity is a very highly high real estate society. You know that people who come there keep a lot of balance and they will probably take more cross-sell products. Same you apply on the app. Right? If you get premium customers, right, who do more credit card payments, they come back to your app, then you hold the first advantage to cross-sell, right? Though you belong to the bank. So the bank says, Acha, this customer talks to you often, why don't you nudge him? It's that simple thing, right? So it's the bank's products, but you don't talk to the bank often. You talk to somebody else. So the bank is using somebody else as a distribution partner to sell. And because I know that you will definitely talk to me once in the morning and once in the evening, I contextualize this in a way that it is relevant for you. And a combination of convenience and relevance and contextualization is helping you buy that product easily. And then the digital railroads and everything. So that's the story, right? I have premium customers coming to me again and again. So
so what else? What do we offer, or what do we use that for? And then build.
So many of the payment companies, if you see, are now doing credit card co-branded partnership because they feel that they will be able to get more customer engagement. So that's the background.
Understood. What do you see is the future of this? Has it reached a pinnacle, or is it still, a lot of it is still greenfield? The banks are building something, the aggregators are building something, people like you, which is like government bank institutions are also working on it. How do you see this ecosystem evolve?
So I think there is still a lot of open space, like we discussed, right? There are lots of payment players who are coming, who are solving for a particular purpose. I think very recently, there was a company called Pay Nearby who got TPAP license. Pay Nearby works with just the SHG kind of corridors, right? They work with a lot of small traders. They solve for a very different purpose. So the audience that they cater to and us will be very different. So many banks are there. There's so much deposit. Each of them cater to a different
so we need them all.
Right? So we need them all.
Everybody is going to sustain
and they are all smart enough to make their own use cases, to make their own they will not walk this path till they know that there is a market. So there's a lot of study and research that goes behind it, right? And then it's not an easy thing to take whatever you're doing, right? Whether you're doing a mutual fund distribution, whether you're doing a NPS distribution, you're doing a lending distribution, all of them have some, I won't say license, or some liability. Your LSP is a liability. Broking agent is a different licensing process and liability. TPAP is a different kind of a process. So you're going through all this. So you know that this pain has got some outcome. So
so everybody will evolve their business strategy and to survive. So since we spoke so much about the banks and using these arms as distribution, etc., there was one interesting data point that I saw, that the internet banking and digital penetration before UPI was only 3.6%, or 3.6% users were doing that. But the UPI completely changed the dynamic of how transactions happen, right? So from a product development standpoint, what is it that stands out? Is it convenience? Is it security? What was the coming together moment, or
I think it is the acceptance infra is what I would say. See, because earlier you had to afford a POS machine to receive a payment, right? Which means I had to carry a debit card or a credit card. And the POS machine cost is a reasonable cost for a small guy to afford. The fact that you have democratized the acceptance infra to say that, you know what, I can receive money without paying for an infrastructure, which is a POS machine, is the first, I would say, big point. And in a way, the banks have also benefited a lot from this, because the velocity with which you're using your bank account is very high. So the chances of your bank account going dormant are very low, right? You will not forget your PIN because you use it very often. Earlier, we used to actually forget ATM PIN. We used to go to the bank branch to draw cash sometimes, right? So the cost to serve for the banks has come down, right? So the acceptance infra, I think, is a very, very important role in this. Even if you had all the apps and if you had not made sure that, the POS is replaced with a QR, we will not be where we are. You still have people who cannot afford that POS because they feel that it's an unnecessary rental overhead, and it actually comes at a cost. So you can't give it free of cost. So I think it's the acceptance infra which is the first start point. And of course, the demand also increased, but I think the supply opened up. That I think was important point.
And like you said, Demon, COVID, there were also those moments that naturally aided the process. I come from the lending side, Lalita, and I can't help ask, when will ULI, become an UPI equivalent? I know we spoke about digital lending, we spoke about digital payments, all of those things, but ONDC, ULI.
See what ULI is doing, and I was a consumer of ULI when I was with the IDFC First Bank, and what ULI is doing is actually something a little different. So it will take probably some time. What they did when I was at least with IDFC was that they had worked with the governments to digitize the crop data,
Yes. Yeah.
right? So the KCC lending can happen
Yeah. I've
digitally.
seen that.
So they are not
Yeah.
going behind the natural already solved for infrastructure, because you can digitally verify PAN, Aadhaar, there is account aggregator. So some of these they are unlocking. So that's going to take time. But there are banks who are very high on KCC who are already using this. I think they've been able to do some 10-minute KCC loans, which was not the case earlier. So
that is one good use case of ULI.
Yeah, and they're also working with multiple people. I think they're working with the MSME people. They're also trying to see how KYC can be simplified. They're trying to use AI markers for, I think, crop data detection. So there are a lot of things that they are doing which are going to be used by the banks. See, finally, ULI is a railroad, right? So NPCI,
so again, you have to have a form factor.
So you have to have a form factor, which most likely is already there. It's not that these form factors are not there. The banks will have to. So like how your merchants opened up, the bank will have to open up, understand the patterns, do an alternate database credit modeling, which they are all doing now, right? And only when that happens and they say, you know what, I am ready to lend, like how the merchant said, I am ready to accept. That's when this will move up. It is moving up. It is not. It will take its time, and rightly so, because you're giving money. You have to be careful when you get the money back.
And the regulator also pushed
back. But the markers are all in the right direction. I think very recently there was this Oken network, James Sahai, which crossed a very good milestone. I don't remember the number, but so these take time because it's a very different kind of a network, different challenges. But yes, they will.
Absolutely. I think RuPay has done a good bit of work around the cards, right? Should we just talk about that?
Yeah, so I think RuPay has grown leaps and bounds over the last few years. And one of the convenience that they have is linking RuPay to UPI. That's what worked like magic. And I think what banks are seeing as a merit again is because of the fact that it's there in your app, you don't need to take your wallet out. The card utilization is higher.
Yes, it's a very, very sleek solution.
You need not give a physical card at all. This means. So, going back to our earlier point on should a minimum card limit, should it be 40,000, 50,000? It can even be 5,000.
Absolutely.
Of course, they have to work out the economics of the, the card fee and various other things, but it has the potential to slash the minimum limit criteria for credit card and take credit card as a completely purely digital credit card with an underlying UPI. And I don't know about the overall number, how it is growing. I didn't track it recently in terms of value. But for me, my RuPay credit card spends have beaten my normal credit card spends.
Okay.
Because it is just there, right? It's there in the app. You just use it. Right? And it still comes with the option of going and converting into an EMI, which is what has been introduced. It comes with the option of getting reward points, getting lounge accesses. So everything is there. I don't need to necessarily take my physical card. I will just do it. So that I think is a great thing.
So I think the plastic will also go. I think it.
Yeah, some people actually like to flash plastic. So
only in the lounge access.
Yeah. But lounge, I don't know whether you visited the RuPay lounge, you have to actually use your app and make the payment.
I don't have.
They don't have a POS.
I should have a RuPay.
They don't have a POS. So and what banks have started doing beautifully is that you're already underwritten for a Visa or a Master credit card. They add on a RuPay in the same limit. So they don't re-underwrite it.
Okay.
So you're assessed as a customer. They add on other railroad plastic on it. So the ability to take the card is much simpler and faster also. So I think it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And again, a homegrown product. So I'm sure that all of us will have pride in owning a RuPay card.
I should own one. So, I mean, the last question around product is that we've taken now NPCI to the globe. We're taking it to many countries. I saw a French.
I think there are about seven,
8. Moment of pride for sure. But how is that ecosystem
Yeah, so
building?
it's developing. I think there also it is important to put the acceptance infra in place. So the acceptance infra has been unlocked with the local players in the market,
Yeah.
because it's very difficult for people to. I think Bhutan, Singapore, they're all
Yeah,
taking
Bhutan
it
we
very well.
used the UPI, which
Yeah,
we were
yeah,
quite
they
happy
use
about.
it very
Huh.
with a lot of recent
Hmm.
stories also. I think during the travel season you find it picking up. All the apps offer international facility, and the best is they give you how you convert and what you convert. So this is also another market which is developing, and there is a separate subsidiary, as you know, which is powering it up, and multiple bilateral discussions which are happening, and I guess this will be another growth
this
story.
is a repeat question, but I can't somehow get over it. That how did India crack it? Like, when there was so much innovation happening in the US, when around, how did we just go about solving for such a large?
I don't know, and I really don't know. I worked. I had had the privilege of working very closely with some of the UI architects. Mr. Pramod Verma was one of them, and Dilip also has been evangelizing this. I think it's a question of people thinking ahead of time, putting a lot of passion in solving some of these things, and I remember that they had thought about even credit line on UPI, Rupee credit cards when they made the railroads, right? It was a ahead of time thinking. And I guess it was, like I said, it was question of multiple things coming together. The acceptance infra, the government pushing for DBT, then of course the fact that UPI is not chargeable. You can make digital payments without having a debit or a credit card. The Jandan account. I think many things came together. It was. I'm sure it has been well thought through. Sometimes it looks like a very strategic coincidence. It will not be. I'm sure it has been well thought through by a lot of visionaries who we may or may not know. But I guess you're right. It's really
something
very inspiring.
Very inspiring. So a lot of shop talk. Now a quick rapid fire with you. What's your favorite book?
I keep reading this book again and again. It's called Unposted Letters.
Okay.
So
written
by Mr. Rangarajan.
Okay.
So it's a very nice book which talks about. It's a very philosophical book, but it's a very nice book. I like that book a lot. Yeah.
Late nights, early mornings.
Late nights.
Filter coffee, masala chai.
Filter coffee.
Newspaper, audiobooks.
Newspaper.
Mountains, beaches.
Beaches.
What's your comfort food?
Mostly it's curd rice. Yeah.
Okay. Fitness routine? There has to be something, Lalita. You have to share it with us.
No, so I walk a lot.
Okay.
Because I don't like to sit in one place. That's the only thing. And I think it's in the genes that I've been blessed with reasonable fitness. So I'm able to I just need to upkeep it. I don't need to do a lot there. So.
Content diet?
Sorry?
Content diet. What do you watch? What do you consume?
I do a lot of binge watching actually. And I watch some of these TED Talks and all of them also.
Favorite movie, favorite series, anything you watched in recent past?
Movie, I don't really remember. I'm still a Rajinikanth, Kamal Haasan fan, so
nice.
any of them
nice.
I watch. Series, I think is, I think Daily Crime I like a lot.
So, yeah. Daily Crime is nice. So, what does family mean to you? What?
So I think, like I said, I've been very lucky to have very, very good supportive systems, families, parents, in-laws, etc. So they actually mean everything, because if not for their support, I don't think I would have been here. So it means a lot.
And what is work? I mean, I kind of know.
Work is actually very addictive. So
I was just going to use the word addiction.
Yeah, it is an addiction actually.
What do you enjoy most about work? This is off the rapid fire. I've gone off the rapid fire. But
just the fact that I'm able to go to work is something that I enjoy. So
Mm.
I actually, I mean, like I said, maybe it's upbringing. I feel very grateful for many things. Grateful for having had the opportunity to go back to work. Grateful for having been here. So, if I take another birth, I would do exactly what I have done this year. So there's no, maybe I won't say there aren't regrets. There are regrets, but I always feel that you have been given a regretful moment because there is something better awaiting you. So it's fine.
Amazing. Because I also say that to get up, get ready and go to work is an
It's a blessing.
absolute blessing and privilege.
It's a blessing.
Yeah.
Especially after COVID, you feel even more. But even otherwise, I'm saying, I think it's a great thing. It's just that you're able to walk, you're able to do what you're doing, and you're able to go to work.
Yeah. Your life mantra and a line. You spoke about gratitude. I think that's just an extension, but
Be happy for what you are and try and see how much you can give back, because it is important for us to nurture others like how we got nurtured directly or indirectly by our seniors and mentors. So I think that's what I would like to.
do you have any message for our viewers, Lalita?
No, so I
Anything that you
think,
want to say?
For the women viewers who are especially getting into the jobs or struggling with multitasking, I just have a few points. I think by nature, we are great at multitasking. Women are very good at multitasking. I think it all comes from the kitchen routine, if you ask me. There's one vegetable cutting going on, and then there is a cooker, and then there is it, and then there is that, and then there's a child who's crying, and then a lot of things, your own food and many things, right? So we are good at multitasking. That's a strength. So if you can multitask at home, you can multitask between office and home. Just hang in there. Your child or you yourself will forget what you went through in the initial stages of work when you had to leave them at a crush, or you had to probably give them less time in their growing days. But they will be happy about it, because the income that two parents can bring is far helpful for them, because they will need to experiment, they will need to do a lot of things in their life, and they will need that comfort. So I think my message will always be for the women, saying that just hang in there. We by nature are used to multitasking. We can have high energy levels by nature, and it is important for us to capitalize on our strength and just keep going.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Vilasini, for
Lalita.
having you around.
An
This
absolute
is
pleasure.
a great
Thank you
session
so
for
much.
me, and thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to yet another wonderful episode from VWP. It gives us enormous pleasure to create this content for you. If you enjoyed listening to the conversation, please hit the subscribe button and do let us know your favorite moments from the conversation. We would also love to hear if you have any guest recommendations for us. Of course, please don't miss our shorts section where we have our favorite moments compiled in bite-sized formats for you. So keep listening, keep growing, and do subscribe to the We Women Project. This is your host, signing off. Thank you.